What's up, everybody? This is Chris Nichols, and you're listening to an episode of the Nichols&Dimez featuring Alex Sterner. Enjoy. Alex, what's going on, man?
How we doing?
Dude, good. Thank you for having me here at Electrum.
Of course. Happy to have you.
Awesome facility you got in here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, guys, let me give a quick intro on Alex Sterner, and then we're going to get into his story. It's really cool. I'm very excited about this one. But I'm here today with Alex Sterner, who is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu strength coach and founder of Electrum Performance, which is a San Diego-based strength training facility and program for grapplers. He is also co-founder of Fight Cut Nutrition and is an Atos BJJ Brown Belt. Alex is originally from Connecticut, attended UConn, where he studied exercise science, and is currently based in San Diego. So, man, I'm stoked about this one. So Dom Bell connected us, right? Mm-hmm. He was one of the coolest episodes I've had so far, and I'm glad we got connected through him. I know you guys do a lot of work together. You sponsor his brand and his content, right? Mm-hmm. But I would love to start off with just who you are, right, from childhood. You grew up in the Northeast, and I'm curious about what your athletic background is, and then going over to UConn to study exercise science. This is a topic that I love. I was a Division I college athlete as well, and you clearly have made this pursuit your career in a successful way, but in a focused way that is not very common, right? You don't see many strength programs that are specific for jiu-jitsu athletes today, right? So I love the niche that you've created, but why don't you just give us a little background on who you are and where you come from?
Yeah, so growing up, I was always like a three-sport athlete, super active, and had an interest in martial arts, and got started when I was around like 13, 14 with jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, and wrestling all at the same time. And while I did other sports, those ones like really, were the ones that I enjoyed the most. But actually, I was super skinny through like middle school and early high school. My freshman year of high school, I wrestled at 119 and 125, and I was 5'10".
Oh, wow.
So like super skinny. The photos from like my freshman, sophomore year, you might think like the resolution is wrong, like it's like a stretched out image, but that's actually how I looked, right? My sophomore year, I cut to 135 and I was already over 6 foot. It was, it was like kind of extreme.
Wow.
It wasn't till, I really started, it's funny, I wanted to get supplements, and my parents were like, all right, hold up. They basically were like, if you want to do anything supplement wise, you have to at least do a certain number of sessions with a trainer, right? And I was young. I just wanted to get the cool stuff my friends were getting.
Sure. Like GNC stuff?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, dumb stuff, right? GNC, but like it wasn't it wasn't an educated thing. It was just like me want to get big, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But they really pushed me to go down, a more educated route. And that really started to spark that interest. And not only that, my junior year, I came in wrestling at 152 and 160, right? And then by my senior year, I was wrestling 189 and 215.
Oh, wow.
Like I really filled out. I took that stuff seriously. I learned as much as I could. I still trained and did stuff pretty stupid all up until I got into that kinesiology program at UConn. But, it really started to show that value of the strength and conditioning side of things, right? I was so used to always being the weaker athlete that when I started to level that playing field, I was like, oh, there's something here, And obviously you also feel good, look better,
for sure,
whatever. But, I really saw it in terms of the sport performance side. And that really lit my fire.
Yeah.
Then went through, got my degree at UConn, worked with a bunch of the Division I teams in the weight room. And upon graduating and going into the private sector, I saw the one-on-one model was it was a waste of time. If you were really pushing effective training via progressive overload, intense sets, long rest periods, if you were my client, we spent a good amount of time with you resting for 3, sometimes 4 minutes if it's a hard set, right? People are paying for that, right? And it's not the best use of your time. It's not or your resources. It's not the best use of my time. So by the time I came out to San Diego in 2015, I already I was not drawn to the one-on-one model. I really wanted, I loved how things ran in a Division I weight room, right? You got 60 track athletes that are coming through at various times throughout the day. They don't all have their own one-on-one coach, right?
Right.
But they're not all doing the same program. They have something that's personalized. It fits where they are through their in-season, off-season, etc. But you don't have your throwers training the same exact way as your sprinters, etc., etc. It was efficient. I couldn't believe how many athletes, some of the coaches that I was under, saw on a day-to-day basis, and how they were able to individualize things and give them the supervision they needed and stuff without wasting a ton of their time. Meanwhile, when I was doing the one-on-one model, if I had 8 hour-long sessions in the day, I'm smoked, and that was to just train 8 people. The way I was thinking about it, like, how scalable is this? It's limited by how many hours you have in a day and what someone can realistically pay for per session. Then, of course, cost gets prohibitive. So, you've got a client who's doing better and better. They're improving, and the thing you need is more face time with them, but your rates are going up because it just didn't make sense, right?
You have a ceiling of how much you can scale, basically, how much time you can give.
For sure.
The one-on-one personal training.
For sure. So there was that. There was, a growing online presence that I had due to a lot of the athletes that I was working with, how they took social media seriously. I'm like, okay, there's value to this for me as well. I started to work. I actually worked under and operated Glute Lab under Brett Contreras for 2 years in PB.
Nice.
In your neck of the woods.
I'm familiar.
And that was huge because he really created an educational platform with social media. It was very different, how his approach for it, how he pushed me, to really teach, to find my voice. That was big. But also, when we sat there with Glute Lab, we had, myself and my business partner that I founded Electrum with, we both worked for him. We had existing clientele. We had a huge influx of interest from Brett. This whole one-on-one model didn't make sense. And I had already wanted to break away from that. So before we ever opened, we actually sat down, the 3 of us, and we were like, okay, how do we give people individualization? How do we make it more affordable so that it's not cost prohibitive? For a couple $100 a month, somebody could see you 4 times a week instead of, you're charging 90 plus a session, or if you're more established, 100, 150 plus a session. How does someone see you 4 times a week for a year? That's an insane investment, right? So we sort of came up with the more the infant stage of our business model here, and we ran with it. We had that price point in between, like group classes that aren't individualized, things like Orange Theory or, there's a bunch of them.
F45, whatever.
Exactly. And, but in between, lower than one-on-one training, but you get that individualization. Actually, in terms of time and stuff, like I wish I could actually teach more coaches to build this type of business model, because for my clients, I plan out at minimum 4 weeks of their programming in advance in a single day. A lot of my clients, Dom, who you met, I have him on 8 or 12 week programs. So for Dom, since I've been training him for so long, it's quick. I can throw together Dom's program in 20, 25 minutes and have his next 12 weeks of training done. And then when I'm on the floor with him, I'm not like thinking of what I have to do. It's like, okay, it's laid out for you. He knows how to execute. I'm coaching him on the finer details. It runs smoothly. And no one person is left paying for my time. Makes sense for the client, makes sense for the coach. When I'm on the floor and I have 6 clients on the floor, it's very rare that all 6 of them are on a rest period at once. Quite frankly, it very naturally gets to where one person's doing a set, I'm sort of helping them, and then right after that, someone else is doing a set. My eyes are over there.
Yeah.
It's engaging for me. We don't have this downtime. But also, there's a level of it's not super high pressure because people aren't paying this extreme like premium, right? So if one client is talking to me or needs extra help, this other person isn't like, oh my God, I'm paying $100. Like, you have to pay attention the entire time. It makes sense for everybody. It's a lower stress thing. It's something that's not cost prohibitive.
Right.
And it's great. You know, my average client here trains with me well over a year.
Wow.
You know, Dom, I started training in 2016.
Wow.
You know, so a lot of these people, because it makes so much sense, it's just very easy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's sort of how, you know, that's how my background led to the business structure we have here and the overall layout. That, you know, the stuff with Glute Labs started early 2018.
Yep.
That's when Brett opened there. Worked for him for about 2 years, opened this place up partway through, you know, right before COVID in 2020.
Right.
Yeah, I've had my own app since 2019, which was a godsend during COVID.
Sure.
But that plays very much into this. I actually train my clients online or in person, all via that app. That program that I'm talking about that I write for people for 4 to 12 weeks, it's done via the app. So, you know, if Dom goes on a seminar tour in Australia for a couple weeks, he's got the same program. It's the thing he's familiar with. It's easy for him. He just finds a place with, you know, the weights for him, and he goes from there.
Right.
So yeah, that's sort of the origin story.
That's amazing, man. I want to zone into something you said about when you identified that this was a gap, this idea of training one-on-one. So you wrestled at UConn, right? Okay. So
wrestled club.
Okay, it's a club. Okay, but you were still working with a lot of the D1 athletes with probably a part of the studies you were doing?
For sure.
So you noticed this model, which I did when I was in college, where it's like a whole team in a weight room and you got maybe a couple coaches, right? But everyone's doing different things and they have it laid out in a very organized and very efficient way, right?
It seems chaotic if you've never been in there and you just walk in, you're like, what the hell? There's so many moving pieces. But if you've been there start to finish of an entire season, or you've got the upperclassmen then helping the under, it actually becomes like this self-policing, like well-oiled machine. It's crazy. You know, as an intern, I was doing a lot of teaching and stuff when I hadn't been there all that long because there was like a space for me to do that, and there was such a well-defined structure, you know?
Right.
And people love that, man. Like, it's crazy how many Division I athletes get in incredible shape, right? They love that structure. They love the format. They get out, and the open-endedness of doing it by themselves is not all that appealing. They go to something like F45, they're like, this is trash, you know, and not hating on people who do enjoy that. I'm just saying, like, a lot of people who find that structure are then like, damn, there's nothing like this.
Right.
You know? Yeah. And it's great. You got someone going for a PR. I'm sure you've been in this. What sport did you?
I played water polo.
Okay, water polo. So someone's going for a PR or whatever, and all of a sudden you guys go from your regularly scheduled programming to everyone. Now you're giving that person your energy.
For sure.
And they're not just attempting to outperform themselves. They're in that team environment. You're normalizing competition. There's so many benefits to it. I don't know if you saw when you walked in. The way that we push things here, you know, I have lots of clients that have had insane transformations in terms of aesthetics, whatever. That's not the image that I put out there. You won't find that on my social media. If my clients post it and are proud of it, I will of course share that, but that is not central to my business. We're about performance and celebrating performance and getting to where you outperform prior versions of yourself. We have a PR board out there and a leaderboard, right? Okay. And there's like, you know, we got people who are frenemies, people who train at different times of day. They haven't even met the other person. Yeah. They just know that person keeps getting ahead of them on that leaderboard.
And that board,
and it normalizes competition, and it's a good thing. It's a healthy way to like celebrate what your body can do. And again, that's reminiscent of what you'll see in a Division I weight room. They're not posting the transformation. Sure, maybe a kid in the off season put on a little weight and he has to lose it. Okay, that's cool, that's good, and we address that. But that's not the image that they're promoting, right? They're trying to celebrate performance, and in that weight room, I'm sure you felt it. You go for that PR, and all of a sudden, people are cheering for you. It feels great. You get it. It's something you've been vying for a long time. It's such a good feeling. Everyone's then clapping afterwards. You feel good about it. Yeah, man. I mean, integrating that social side into it without it just becoming social hour, right? It's not, it's not something, the social side doesn't hijack it, it enhances it.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, I love you described the appeal to this group training environments that's also individualized very well. And I get it. But when was it that it clicked that this one-on-one model just didn't really work, right? Because you know, it's one thing to notice, hey, this works really well in the Division I environment, but it's another thing to say, hey, I see this one-on-one session going on here. There's a lot of wasted time here when they're in rest periods. There's this pressure that you mentioned, right? Was there a certain point in your experience where you were around that type of training, this one-on-one training, that made you say, hey, I can create something of my own and fix this?
Yeah, so it's
like, was it with Brett or was it some point before?
Oh no, man, it was like okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
okay.
I know exactly what you mean. It was immediate. So I didn't even realize how awesome the Division I environment was until I went back to, the commercial gym setting as an employee or contractor or whatever, however you would categorize a personal trainer in that environment. You've got coworkers, but they're kind of your competitors, whatever, right? Till I was in that environment. No, it was immediate. It was like I had people. So I just got out of college. I'm obviously broke, right? I'm convincing people to spend. I'm looking at what I'm convincing them to spend monthly, which that point in time, I've got the imposter syndrome. Sure, I got the knowledge, I've got the experience and stuff, but like at that point in time, you got all these questions. You're like, damn, you're like, how much per month? Like, I'm looking at me cutting costs, and then I'm trying to convince someone to spend, sometimes upwards $600-700 a month to train with me, and I'm like, damn, am I worth that? What would I pay for that? You know what I mean? Like, or what would I want to receive for that amount of money? It was a very, and nowadays, I can very confidently say now with all these other things I have going on, I don't structure one-on-ones for my schedule regularly. If someone wants to, great, $250 an hour. And now I don't feel bad about it because I know that taking my time away from these other projects, it's worth it. I know that if you want to pay me for that time, I will make sure it's worth it. We'll track every detail. For sure. You'll get that value out of it, but I actually kind of want the cost to be prohibitive there. I don't want to load up my schedule with one-on-ones. For sure. Right? But yeah, when did I realize that? I mean, it was immediate. It was as I started to load up my days, as I transitioned out of school, and I'm like, all right, I'm trying to be a productive human. I'm trying to grow my brand. I'm trying to hone my craft, right? I always knew I wanted to get into jiu-jitsu, but at the time I was still in Connecticut. I moved back with my parents after I graduated, and the goal was actually to save up money to move out to San Diego. No, the goal was to save up money to move somewhere. I wasn't 100% sure, and I'd always kind of thought California was cool. I'd come out to visit a few times. It wasn't until so I've got these stressors building, right? I'm like, man, the one-on-one environment ain't it. Yeah. The jiu-jitsu scene in Connecticut ain't it. There's a bunch of things. I'm just kind of like, I know the direction I'm trying to go. I don't know the specifics. I'm not like, I need a job there, but I'm like, I want to go this way with things. My buddy, who I lived with in college, was already living out here, immediately upon graduating. And he was training at Atos. I fly out to compete in Pan Ams in 2015. Competed, trained at Atos a little bit, and I was like, damn, this is where I got to be. Went back home. Like, the environment out here, having so many high achievers in one place, it's crazy. I don't tell this story all that often, but what I compare that to, I don't know how much you follow college sports. UConn, not known for football. Absolutely known for basketball. As I was interning for different teams, I interned for football for 2 days. I was in there. It was a toxic environment. You try to talk to the players, they would act like you don't exist. Right? Very much, but like a losing environment. That's why these dudes were bottom feeders. Like it precipitates more of that negativity, right? Versus it was much more competitive to get in there. They don't have as much space. The strength coach for basketball, which is UConn's pride and joy, was just, there was a strength coach for men's basketball, and that's it. He worked with those 12 athletes. That's all he did. And they had a weight room for men's and women's basketball, and that's it. And I wound up working, not as long, but or not as long as other sports, but I worked with men's and women's basketball, actually, my senior year in 2014 when they both won a national title. It was insane.
That's cool.
Now, the crazy thing is that first day that I was in that men's basketball session, Shabazz Napier and Ryan Boatwright both walk up to me and introduce themselves to me.
Oh, cool.
Okay. Shabazz, who won a title 3 years ago with Kemba and all those guys that everyone saw, the nation saw on TV.
Yeah.
I know who you are, Shabazz, but it's the gesture, right?
Sure.
It's that winning environment where, man, immediately I was drawn in. They were like, what's your name? It was way different. These are the actual stars on campus. And immediately, new face, introduced themselves, set the tone, the leadership from the top down. All the other guys shook my hand as well, right?
That's cool. What a great story.
Dude, partway through the season, they're having me, if I'm done with my intern hours, the coach was great. The strength coach that was, Travis Illian at the time. He was great. He welcomed me to lift and use the equipment and stuff. If I was done interning, I would lift. Man, I distinctly remember a time I'm going for a PR on a Hatfield squat, and the guys are just like stretching, drinking protein shakes and stuff after their session, and they all start yelling for me, going for a PR. It was unreal,
That's
right?
sick.
Like, I didn't have to be anything to them. I was an intern. It didn't matter, right? But in that winning environment, it's different qualities rise to the surface, right? Now, fast forward to coming out here, I had trained Muay Thai, MMA, more things than just Jiu-Jitsu. And coming out here, my buddy was at Atos, and I was like, okay, Atos seems really cool, but they only do Jiu-Jitsu. I'm like, am I really willing to give that other stuff up? Come out, once I move out here, sign up for my free week at Atos. Still not sold on it. Okay. It's like my third day, and Andre Galbao, the head of the academy there, was running the class. He has us doing situations, we're doing a specific position, and then he wants to go live from that position. So he's like, all right, everyone, go ahead, grab water, grab your mouth guards, come back out. We're going to go live. Okay. Class of 30, maybe 40 people, right? He sends us to the locker room. I go in there. I'm like, oh shit, my mouth guard isn't here. And I'm like, I must have left it the day prior. It was a $5 mouth guard from Walmart, right? It's not. And who steals a mouth guard? Anyways, it's not there, right? So I'm looking around for it. Everyone else goes out. He starts class. He notices that I don't come back out, right? He starts class. He comes into the locker room and I kid you not, it was like in my mind, it was like a parallel event, right? This guy who I've looked up to for a long time, a legend in the sport, a dude who's still competing, still on top of the game. Introduces himself to me, asks me my background. He's like, "Oh man, you wrestled, blah blah blah." I thought I could tell that with how you were moving out there, and talks to me for 15 minutes as we look for a mouth guard that we know isn't there, right? What is it to this dude? Who am I to this? I haven't even given him $1 yet, right? Yeah. And that was when I was like, okay, there's something parallel here, and that was it for me. I was like, you know what? This is where I want to be. Wow. So
that's so cool. It's the alignment of a winning environment. You saw exactly UConn basketball teams, and then at Atos.
Totally different contexts, but the same qualities. Right. Yeah. Where someone will look you in the eyes, and they'll talk to you. Just very different than that perpetual losing environment that you'll find in lots of different places, right? I think there's work environments like that. The list goes on, right? And I think that very much what we try to do, even here, that resonated with me. It's something that I try to do as often as possible and try to set that tone and keep that rolling. It's a very good thing. The way that we approach, normalizing competition with our PR board, everything, we try to let those better qualities rise to the surface, but yeah, that was, that was huge coming out here. And then, it really got me here to where I was like, I not only wanted to join, I started competing with Atos. That's how my thought was like, damn, maybe within 10 years or so, I'll be training these competitors. It was 2 months later that JT Torres, one of the top competitors there that now has an academy in New York, excuse me, he just had meniscus surgery, wanted to take his body more seriously. He started working with me in the weight room, and all these other guys snowballed right after that. Yeah. Wow. So yeah, it was wild.
Okay, so just in the midst of all this, I'm just trying to understand what you were doing to make money with the training specifically. Like you mentioned in there, you worked with the Glute Lab, Brett Contreras for a little bit, and outside of that, you said you had created this app. Did you have this intention to take an entrepreneurial approach to this since you were in college? And did you have that idea also back then that you wanted to work with, grapplers, MMA fighters, so forth?
Yeah, I remember very distinctly, like, there was a day in one of our administrative kinesiology courses where they talked about what we wanted to do with our career. And I very much wanted to work in either MMA or Jiu-Jitsu. Combat sports have always been a passion of mine. So, strength and conditioning sort of grew as a parallel passion. And I wanted to combine those things. At the time, the UFC Performance Institute did not exist.
Yeah.
A bunch of these other, both of these sports are young sports,
right?
They're growing rapidly.
Sure.
But like you said, you haven't really heard of this niche. It didn't exist.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that was kind of a scary thing. That's why with a lot of this stuff, I've always known the direction I want to go in, but because it's not like a clearly it's not a well-beaten path, I've just kind of known that it's in this direction. And I know that bouncing around in this direction, it may not always be like the furthest move along that course, but I consistently figuring things out in that direction.
Yeah.
Saying it now, it might sound like a lot more of that stuff was more well put together than it actually was at the time. The job that the interview I had lined up when I moved out here, it was at a Parisi. They work like speed, agility, quickness with like younger athletes, middle school, high school age kids. Didn't love the job, paid the bills. That's what I was doing at first when I first started training at Atos. Started training some of those guys on the side at that Parisi. I then got a job at UCSD, doing a lot more different things then, working with some of their staff, doing some personal training, whatever. And at the same time, started renting out a space with that guy that I co-founded Electrum with. He moved out here not long after me. We both went to UConn. We started, training. Then it got to where in 2017, we were training the entire Atos competition team at one time, literally like a Division I weight room.
Wow. And that crazy. And that was just by creating the relationships and training with them at Atos.
Yeah, and competing with them. Through 2015 and 2016, and even all the way through 2017, I was competing pretty much full time. I talked to Dom and stuff. We talk about the good old days of training. I was competing about once a month in the IBJJF. I was going to comp class between 3 and 5 days a week. I was training 5 to 6 days a week. I remember 2015 into 2016 on New Year's.
Yeah,
it's my first New Year's out here. I was training so much jiu-jitsu at the time that I was actually drilling with drilling jiu-jitsu with a few other friends of mine at Dom's apartment. One of those people was his roommate. Through New Year's, I remember we looked over at one point and we're like, "Oh, tight. It's 2016," and then we just kept drilling, right?
Wow.
Obsessed with it.
That's awesome.
And I've trained since 2004, right? But it was that winning environment coming out here was very different. It was invigorating. Wow. So I was just trying to make the most of training here, and at the same time, loosely knew that in this direction was okay, I want to work with these guys, but it's a young sport. A lot of these guys are up and coming. Yeah, Dom is a huge face in jiu-jitsu now. Right. He wasn't really then. He won a purple belt world title right before I came out here. He was a name, but he wasn't, what he is now. A lot of these guys weren't. So we were all sort of just figuring stuff out in that direction. And now looking back at it, we've got this platform, we do these things. It was much more disorganized at the time and sort of far off pipe dream that I'm sort of chipping away at, that I think I'm heading in the right direction. But a lot of these fell together at very different points. Yeah. The constant throughout the whole thing was, training jiu-jitsu, really, really hunting down the best environment to do that, applying my strength and conditioning, both myself and with the people I was working with. And just, when you have a passion for two of those things, and they are two parallel things, I train with somebody enough, and they're like, oh, what do you do? I'm like, oh, I work with actually the dude over there on the mat and that dude. And
wow.
Then I train with that person, and it just spreads,
Yeah. No, that's awesome, man. So the community played such a huge role in bringing you to this point where you were able to found Electrum. And I mean, working with the Atos guys, you created your personal brand as a trainer in the midst of that, right? And it sounded like being connected with people like Brett, who are established, was probably helpful to that. Obviously, creating relationships with all the guys you trained and competed with.
Man, Brett, sorry, not to like cut you up. Brett was that was almost like a moment of serendipity. Bryce, who was the co-founder I keep referring to, him and I were, we both worked at UCSD at the time. We followed a bunch of the big names in strength and conditioning. And we saw a post from Brett saying he had just moved to PB. We lived in PB at the time, right? And I'm just like, it was crazy. We were talking about it. We're like, damn, we should hit him up. But at the time, now he's got 1 million some followers. I think at the time he had like 260,000. Sure. Still a large, a large platform. But we were like, should we hit him up? Should we not? And we're like, I don't know. And one day we're walking down. We lived on Diamond. Walked all the way down Diamond. One of the, like right by the water, there's like an apartment with, like it was an old storefront property, but the windows were sort of tinted. Yeah. We're walking past, going to the beach one day, and Bryce's girlfriend at the time was like, does that say Flute Lab? And we're like, wait, what? And it was Glute Lab before Glute Lab had that separate lease. It was directly under his apartment. Ah, wow. And Bryce and I, we've always been big on networking and stuff. We're like, all right, how do we meet this guy? Yeah. So we were like, okay, well, we see his Instagram stories and stuff. He loves to lift at night. Like, should we be creepy and just like happen to be here at night one time? And so what that led to is I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to shoot the dude a DM. Yeah. And we'll see. And like, he answered instantly. He was like, oh man, would love to meet up with you guys. Come lift tonight. Went and lifted with him, even though I'd already lifted that day. I had Worlds in like 2 weeks. But I was like, damn, this is an opportunity. Sure. When someone who's established doing the thing that you do hits you up, you go. Okay, yep. Yeah, so we went. Immediately, he's like, yeah, I'm going to be getting a lease and opening another place. I want to have a business. He's like, you guys have your CSCS? We do. We had the education. Our training paradigms were similar. It just, made a ton of sense. And that's how that happened. That happened very quickly. Wow. And I was like, he made us that offer. Instantly, we were like, all right, we're quitting our jobs at UCSD. Quit our jobs there. It's amazing. He still allowed us to train our athletes on the side and build that side of things. So he basically it was a full-time job, but he was... Oh, yeah. Yeah. It was a lot of work. More than that, maybe. Yeah. I think a lot of really successful people... It's funny, now I look at myself, maybe not the really successful side of things, but... a lot of people who aim for that level of success lose a sense of balance in their life. You were talking to me before we got started about how often I train jiu-jitsu now. Sure. Once a week. I've lost that sense of balance. Not too far, but enough to take a hit on my jiu-jitsu. Following that much more real and like literally like physical business dream. Sometimes to try to really, whether it's pulling myself out of COVID, whether it's whatever, you lose that sense of balance. And we got a sense of that immediately when we were working for Brett. Yeah. He's extremely focused to a fault, but like that, he's working all the time. Yeah. And at first we were like, dude, what is this? But we learned a lot of good lessons. Yeah. He helped us a lot with social media, how to get our voice out there. The educational side of things, we read research all the time. As a trainer, I never needed to read any research after I graduated college. It doesn't. I think that it helps in some sense, but like I can still help people without that stuff. But he had this fire to constantly learn more, to really better understand it. There were a lot of good lessons to be learned there. Right. I'm sure. So yeah. So just I'm just trying to zoom out on those key relationships, networking experiences you had with others that
helped you to grow your brand? And it sounds like, what you just described, Brett did have a significant impact on helping you perhaps, work on the content you were putting out, grow a social media presence, right? Gain some exposure, and then obviously that led to you had your jiu-jitsu clients from Atos, and then I assume you probably got some more clients who weren't just jiu-jitsu players, right? But I want to talk about the beginning of Electrum. So I'm really interested in the progression of your products, because you had Electrum for how long exactly was it before you opened this facility? A couple years? Or a year or so?
No, a couple years. So Electrum already existed, and we were already doing those team training sessions.
Oh, so that was
before we met Brett.
Oh, so that was all under Electrum already?
Early on it was called Alloy. Actually, funny enough, the first time working for Brett that he ever shared one of our posts, it was a glutes for BJJ thing. It merged our two niches. Yeah. So he shared that the very first time we did that, it blew up our posts. Yeah. We were like, this is great. Immediately got slammed with a cease and desist because someone else had Alloy trademarked under. But important business lesson anyways. It was always kind of like our side hustle. We didn't look a ton into, like, we kind of, I don't know if you've ever gone through like the trademarks and copyrights and stuff online. It's not exactly the most user friendly thing. Yeah. So when we looked around for Alloys, we didn't find it initially. It existed. They had their trademarks and whatever. But yeah, just immediate lesson. Slice of humble pie. Like, okay, looks like we're like, oh wow, this post is doing great. Our platform's growing, and now we got to rebrand. Yeah. And it's funny because at the time, it felt like such a monumental thing. Like, we have this like reputation already in jiu-jitsu, and like at the time, like we hadn't done anything, but it was everything to us then, So like changing our image seemed like this daunting thing, And I even remember at first we kept like, because it was earlier on in Instagram, and so many people were tagging us in their descriptions. It would leave Alloy Strength. So we made like a redirect Instagram from Alloy from when people had tagged us in the past that would direct them to Yeah. But anyways, we learned a lot of important stuff from Brett. I think the way to look at social media as a producer and not a consumer was maybe the biggest lesson. And I think that's important when you start to use it as the extremely valuable business tool that it is. You can't be over consuming it yourself. Yeah. Enough to study and learn what works and stuff like that. But you're trying to produce, you're trying to provide value, you're trying to teach, so that, further down the road, you can make money off of it and use it as the business tool that it is. Outside of the last 10 years, there's never been a time in the history of business that you could instantly announce a new product to tens of thousands or more people within your target demographic for free. Right. I was reading this older book on marketing, and they were talking about the costs, the cost of printing out different things for mailing out flyers to whatever, and like, just to announce something or to get information out there, and how there were all these costs and how you then had to factor that into your potential return. And nowadays it's like, so, you have an email list, which again is free. You have all these different things that if you build them the right way, and you do that by sharing value and it's just kind of a wild, so Brett did a really good job of categorizing things like that and showing us that there is definitely a very valuable way you can approach that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's cool. So I want to just kind of run through the specific products you have today, right? You have I want to understand what types of programs are available to people, what levels of engagement with you, for example, or in a more group environment do you offer? And then, fight cut nutrition, like what exactly is that? Is that like a specific weight cutting program, right, for fighters specifically? And then who are your clients? Obviously, this is meant for grapplers, jiu-jitsu. That's how you describe it. But do you do work with MMA as well? Do you work with people who are non-fighters or grapplers? How do you separate, basically, how do you categorize everything you offer today? Cool. All right, let's start with in person. So, here at Electrum, we train people. I'd say about half of our clientele are jiu-jitsu. I won't even say athletes. Half of them are jiu-jitsu practitioners, and a portion of them are athletes themselves. And about half don't train jiu-jitsu, or at least not regularly.
Sure.
I've worked with MMA fighters all the way up through the UFC.
Nice.
Not nearly in the number as jiu-jitsu, but combat sports are pretty similar to Program 4. Slight differences for each, but it's not a crazy change.
Sure.
So yeah, that's how things work here. And they exist, all of our training is structured, so we don't have open gym hours. Everyone starts with a one-on-one with myself or a coach. We then use that one-on-one to go over a membership with them, and get a personalized program written. And then they're coming in and executing that program while we have coaches on the floor. So that's how stuff works in person. For online services, we do a ton of programming through our app. Our flagship program is called Team EP. It's $29.99 a month. Starts with a 7-day free trial. Every 4 weeks, I write a new program specific to jiu-jitsu with a different focus. 1 month might be isometric strength. One month might be, lately I've been terming them or categorizing them with more general terms, like a wrestling program. What that's going to include is like some rotational power, bit of conditioning, some additional grip strength, stuff like that, right? But it's got a specific theme. So you get access to this month's program and the 50 plus prior months that we've had. That's $29.99 a month. I think it's like the best value. It's the thing that we really, the thing that I'm trying to share with the most people. I also do custom programming, and so do my coaches. My coaches charge $99 a month for a custom program, which works just like our programming in person. It's just you never see us. Right. So we would talk about like goals, injury history, what equipment you have available, etc. Write you a program for 4 weeks. You do that program for 4 weeks. We correspond as we go, do form checks, etc. And then the next one, based on that info, we write that next one. So that's the online offerings for Electrum. Fight Cut is diet templates for, it's marketed to combat sport athletes, and a lot of things based on, it'll even feed you a little bit more on your training days or your double training days. It's sort of structured like a jiu-jitsu or combat sport athlete who may lift and train their sport specific stuff in the same day. But it's a PDF. It brings you through a step-by-step, diet. It starts actually not all that restrictive, slowly makes it more restrictive as, the rate of change for your, weight loss, or we have weight gain templates as well. As that rate slows down, you progress to the next phase. Right. Then it also brings you back out of that diet. Instead of simply hitting the finish line and being like, screw it, I lost the weight, and then eating whatever. Yeah. It slowly increases your your calories and intake again. Yeah. So that you don't destroy your body. Well, don't destroy your body. It's good for you to ease back into it, but also that you're not driven to just eat like a lunatic afterwards. Because as you slowly up your calories little by little, I like to think of your willpower while dieting as like an HP bar. Kind of a nerd, but basically your HP bar is very low as you get really restrictive. Yeah. If with a low HP bar for willpower, we go, all right, we're done. You're going to go nuts. You're going to eat everything, right? Yeah. You're going to drive past In-N-Out and you're going to smell it and be like, oh, that's where I'm going right now. If we slowly refeed you in a structured way and increase your calories from there, not only is it better for your body as a whole, but that HP bar fills back up, so you're not as likely to just go nuts and regain all that weight. So that's what's offered via Fight Cut. And it has a bunch of written supplemental information and stuff like that. Yeah, no, I love that. I love the levels you have with the training and then the nutrition program to supplement that. I love the offering overall. I do want to get into some of your philosophy in your training a little bit. I just have a question about that, and then I want to knock out some
business related questions, just, because this is an entrepreneurship focused podcast, but every entrepreneur I have has a totally different business. And I mean, I've been training jiu-jitsu this year. I love it. I've been a lifelong enthusiast of fitness and strength training. So I'm very curious to pick your brain on this topic a little bit. And the question I have is, what are your top 5 exercises for grapplers and why?
Well, you want the clickbait title or do you want the real answer?
Let's hear the real answer.
Okay, let me get into it from that clickbait perspective.
Okay.
Real quick. Like, everybody's looking for like that thing, right?
Yeah.
And people will I mean, I have things like, I have a video on YouTube, the best squat for jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
That's the title.
Right.
The first thing I say in the video is the best squat for jiu-jitsu is the one that agrees with your body, allows you to train hard and consistently. Mm-hmm. Squat variations have way more in common than they do differences.
Yeah.
We love to get hung up on those differences, but those differences are so small. Comparing a squat to a deadlift, very different. Comparing a squat to a bench press or what, like front versus back squat, high bar versus low bar, like it. Mm-hmm. Find one that you can train with a high degree of effort that your body doesn't push back against because, maybe your joints don't agree with it at this point in time.
Yeah.
Is the front rack position hard for you to get to? All these minor details. Find something that works for you. Mm-hmm. Train it over the long run. Look to constantly outperform that prior version of yourself. Mm-hmm. That's the best squat for you.
Okay.
And that's true whether you're a jiu-jitsu athlete, a rugby athlete, etc.
Yeah.
For the 5 best, I mean, I would just pick movement patterns. A squat, a hinge or deadlift, a push, a pull, and maybe a lunge, right? Which specific lunge, which specific push or pull, again, that's based on the things that agree with your body at this point in time. That may change over time. It should change over time. But a degree of regularity where we can compare apples to apples. We're not comparing our military press Monday to our bench press on Wednesday. We're comparing our military press one week to that same exact exercise the next week and the next week, much like I'm sure you did in college, where I can guarantee you if 6 months from now, on a bad day, your military press is more than it is today on your best day, your body has changed so significantly that will transfer to your sport, whether it's jiu-jitsu, water polo, etc. So the real answer is there are no magic ones. There's these general movement patterns that we find a way to train. We train hard, super high degree of effort. We try to constantly drag along general adaptation by outperforming our prior self. Yep. You do that consistently over the long run, whatever you did, that's the best squat you could have been doing, or the best push or the best pull, etc.
So when you say that, I have noticed in a lot of your content online, your Instagram, the videos you've made, you modify a lot of traditional exercises, right? Like I've seen, for example, the deadlift, where they are putting their arms out in front, and it's almost like this. It aligns. It's parallel to the situation in jiu-jitsu where somebody is standing up and someone's on their back on the ground in guard, right? And perhaps they're holding you, and you're kind of stuck. You're standing up. And it looks to me like that would give you that strength to fight against that, right? Or even pick them up, right? So I guess that's what I'm more interested in specifically is what are a couple of examples of some of those modifications you've made to traditional exercises like a squat, like a deadlift, or like some sort of push or pull, or a bench press, right? What would be a modification for jiu-jitsu for, let's just say, the bench press, for example?
So, I mean, those are the things that garner views. It's funny. A lot of the stuff with the Zercher deadlift I did, I jokingly one day, while I was working out, my coach was coaching on the floor. I'm working out at the same time as some of my clients. I'm messing around with that new Zercher deadlift variation. Not something I've done for years. This is like actually in the last 6 months or so that I started to really consistently hit it. I joked about how it's like you know, that old Pride fight where Rampage Jackson picks up Ricardo Arona. He's being triangled, and he picks him up and slams him and knocks him out.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
It's like a classic thing. And I jokingly took a trending song. I took a video of me doing that eye-catching variation and immediately backed it up with that. And then another athlete that films videos here did something, a jiu-jitsu specific thing similar, right? Just lined them up with the music, did it, and it got like millions of views, right? Like blew up. And it was, why do you do that lift? Me. And then just, you know, slamming people. Obviously, that's not why I do that lift. But my point is, there's not, while that's very attention grabbing and it can be useful to get people present on the platform, there's also another thing that I've been leaning into recently, the idea that rounding your back is inherently bad, especially under load. It's not. The tissues of our body, if we apply, it doesn't matter what structure we're talking about. If I take a stressor that's challenging, I apply that to that tissue. Let's say it's the structures of the elbow. And then I give you adequate time to recover. And then I do it again, but it's a little bit more intense. And I do that. Like, that's the same process we were just talking about. And that's how I get the structures around your elbow to adapt and change and positively remodel. The bone, the ligaments, the tendons, the soft tissue, the muscle, everything. So those magical variations don't exist, but I like to lean into those myths that lifting with your, with a rounded back is bad. In that deadlift variation, it's impossible to not round your back a bit. Right. I post it. It's crazy. The ones that go viral, the amount of people are like, check back in 10 years, bro. And I'm like, okay, I will. Like it's not this inherently, it's like the old knees over your toes, right? Like now there's a guy, Ben Patrick, knees over toes guy that leaned into that myth, a myth that is not rooted in reality. If our knees aren't supposed to pass our toes, how are we supposed to go downstairs? Right? Like, it happens all the time. How do you, a classic double leg in wrestling. Right. Do you see people's knees exploding as they shoot doubles? Like, not really. Right? Why? The knees go way past the toes. Right? So essentially, sometimes I'll lean into those things a little more because it grabs attention. And it's useful to teach people, like, hey, it's not bad for your knees to pass your toes or for your back to round, right? Just like you said, wow, this looks very similar to jiu-jitsu. Sometimes when you pick someone up, you're not picking the guy up from guard. You're not like, oh, hold on, making sure your back's perfectly straight and picking him up. Like, the body is not meant to move like that. Likewise, we don't need to train the body like that. We want to train those slightly different variations, those things that are going to transfer. I don't think it's superior. I have just as many athletes of mine doing that deadlift variation as I do a sumo deadlift or a conventional block pull. The variation doesn't really matter. I would say some things that maybe I prioritize a bit more are like isometrics for jiu-jitsu athletes. A simple pull-up hold is like a favorite of mine to grab someone's attention. Yeah, that's a great one. How long can you hold your chin above the bar until you can't anymore? There are a lot of things. A squat 1 rep max isn't really predictive of success in jiu-jitsu, right? There are some guys that are extremely talented at jiu-jitsu that may not surprise you with how much weight they squat. For sure. What I will say is if we take anybody who performs at a very high level in jiu-jitsu and you say, hey, hold your chin above the bar for as long as you can, that will predict success. And there's certain things that I've done, like the combine in football, right? There's certain things they do that can predict success, right? Hey, if you've got a 46-inch standing vert and you're over 6 foot and you have a sub 4.5 40-meter dash and your hand circumference is above a certain thing, it doesn't matter how well you run routes or catch a ball right now. You have certain skills that can't even be taught, right? They can do the combine and be like, hey, this dude's a bit raw, but he has some intangibles, right? Something similar to that is, like a pull-up hold. Likewise, if I've got somebody who's a lower level competitor or just a practitioner looking to improve performance, up that pull-up hold time and watch your ability to stick guard passes, to lock in submissions and maintain it. There we go. Isometric strength is super, super important. So if I was going to answer that question, I don't think there's necessarily variations, but like pause squats, pull-up holds, things where you're able to really build that isometric strength translates to jiu-jitsu very well, and that's something that a lot of people overlook. Well said. I like that. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Cool. Well, I love the philosophy. I could ask you about this all day long, but I just want to cover the business stuff a little bit more here as we finish up. I do want to understand it, if you could pick, it could be specific or general over your entrepreneurial journey, the biggest challenge you've experienced or encountered. How would you describe that?
The biggest challenge, well, easy answer is COVID. But there's not much. I mean, the only thing I really learned from that is like diversify your business. Sure. I don't know how much I could talk about that. I think a consistent barrier is self-imposed limitations, right? From a business standpoint. I mentioned, I believe before we were recording, that me, Dom, and Heather have regular like strategy meetings, and we film our content together and stuff. It's funny, during our strategy meetings, the vast majority, so, you know, we have a strategy meeting planned. We all sit down in this office. We have, some notes as to some things that we're going to be doing as it relates either to our conversions or content strategy or whatever. And seriously, there was one session, it was insane, where the three of us shared, and it was basically sharing an idea, a good idea, but having these inhibitions that weren't rooted in reality. And the other two people just being like, you're stopping yourself before you ever give this a chance, right? And I get it. Like when you're analytical, when you're looking at things and you're trying to figure out what does and doesn't work, it's natural. Like you're not going to be a 100% optimist all the time. You can't. You have to figure out the best uses of your time, the best direction for your efforts. And that involves sometimes being critical. Yeah. But when that's a little unchecked, it can limit your growth and productivity. So I think the constant looming thing is, and that's why I think it's important to have the right people around you, is that self-imposed limitation, that before an idea really even has a chance, you're already going, that won't work. Yeah. Why? What makes you say that? That you just had that idea 10 minutes ago. What do you mean it won't work? Like, how can we rework this? How can we look at it? How do we test it? You know, throw a line in the water, see if it goes anywhere. So I think that's something, especially, you know, that was a theme a lot for 2023 for me, was trying to limit or like quiet those self-imposed limitations, to allow myself to be more productive, to try things, to test things, and then reflect on what happened. Yeah. Then when you got some data, you can go, okay, that doesn't work. I know that doesn't work because I tried it. Yeah. Then the question is, okay, do we rework it? Do we try again? Or do we go, you know what? That actually just doesn't work at all in any sense. Right. Let's shelf that. Right. So I think sometimes getting out of your own way, that limitations, or you know, however you posed the question originally, that challenge, that problem, it's always there. And you know, it's normal to be critical and stuff, but being critical of something before it's been born is not too strong of a trait, right? You know, throw those things out there, test it, and then once you have data, then you do need to be critical, right? Yeah. We can't pursue everything that we want to in business. You do only have so many hours in a day, and then you do need to look. You need to be able to weigh one thing versus another, and when you have that hard data, you can go, this idea is better than this one. Yeah. Just don't have that critical mindset start too early, or you're never going to get things out there before you haven't even tried it. For sure. Yeah. Love that. This is such an important mindset that has come up before. Actually, it's super cliche, and I feel like if I told myself that like 5 years ago, I'd be like, what a non-answer. But it's not a non-answer. No. Like when you're actually spending time planning things out, you know, developing content strategy multiple months at a time and everything. Like it's kind of wild how many things you'll sort of nip in the bud before it's ever given a chance. You know, I have a whole notebook just for content brainstorming and planning. And sometimes I go back and I'm like, why did I not run with this? I remember feeling the resistance of like, I don't think this is going to work, whatever, but I never tried. And I never got the data on like, that actually doesn't work. Right. You know? So I do think that's like some people who might not be ready to hear it might think that's a non-answer, but I do think that's like a very real thing. Nice, man. What is your next big goal with where you are today?
with how far you've come along building Electrum, what's your next big goal in your entrepreneurial journey, or taking Electrum Performance, or whatever else that might be? If you're comfortable sharing.
Doing less. And what I mean by that is I have a tendency to think of the next thing, the next shiny thing. I've figured it out. I've got the piece. Let me work on this. That sometimes it draws me away from really cementing the things that I've already done either 90% or all of the work to, where it's a matter of building it up more, right? As opposed to creating more passive revenue streams. How do I develop a more efficient content strategy for the revenue streams that I have to where they're, more profitable, right? It's not about creating the next fight cut for me. It's how do I really now circle back and create that? It took a shift for me when I stopped. When I bought out my business partner. We had a really good way of I was sort of looking and planning out and brainstorming the next thing, and he was helping cross the T's and dot the I's. And when I lost him, I sort of realized oh damn, I've got to do that. So for a while, I was sort of lost in this limbo where I'm I want to create these new things, but other things were getting underwatered because of that. So it was already sort of my goal in 2023, but I had some final things to tie up. And now that I have done that, the whole thing with 2024 is there are no new projects. I want to continue to build out and work on the things that already exist and do a better job with those things.
Love that. Just continuing to maximize the efficiency with what you have already. Yeah, that's awesome. So, and this is a common question I ask at the end to every entrepreneur. It's kind of like my signature question. I've done a few recap episodes on this question, on what I've gathered, trends I've noticed. But the question is, what is an entrepreneurial life hack that you have in mind to share with the audience that's against the mainstream belief?
This might go against the entire platform that you have built. Someone else hasn't figured it out for you. So many people, whether it's, Alex Hormozi or whoever who didn't have this massive platform just 2 years ago or whatever, right? Everybody thinks that someone else has their morning routine, their whatever the hell the thing is.
Yeah.
Just like in the weight room, the exercises for you that are ideal for you, it's crazy. I'll have a client whose entire program that I write for them are exercises that I hate doing myself. I'd never write that as my program, but they're not me.
Yeah.
Right. And I think sort of seeing people for who they are, and that they shouldn't be copies of me. I also think the same thing with my coaches. When they interned for me before they ever coached for me, and one of the first things I told them, okay, we're going to go over program design, and we're going to hammer this out. It's going to take a long time. I take program design very seriously.
Yeah.
But I was one thing I don't want, this is not a college exam. When I give you my answer, that's not the rubric, and I'm not trying to have you learn how to game the test. I don't want you to be a shitty copy of me. Sorry, I don't know if you could use language on here, but I want them to really, there's plenty of ways to accomplish the task at hand.
Yeah.
I want them to celebrate their individuality while doing the things that they do need to do. I think entrepreneurship is the same thing. My business is not like other people's business. And while they may come to even this podcast thinking, dang, maybe I'll pick up that nugget from him. And I do this too. I mentioned Hormozi. I watched some of his stuff.
Sure.
There's useful nuggets in there, but he doesn't have my secret. Right? There's an element of, yes, learn from whoever you can, but don't be so open-minded that you lose your sense of identity. I think a huge element of being an entrepreneur is to develop that sense of identity. You mentioned, my niche, and the fact that was a relatively unpaved. Yeah, it was an unpaved territory, right? I sort of had to go through that, but I did when I had opportunities. I learned from people. I learned from Brett when I could. I wasn't ready to do all of it myself yet. I wanted to learn and grab that value, but if the amount of time that I talked about learning under him is any indication today, like, you know, it's important to have both of those, right? Be open to those sources of information, but do not forget the fact, like, okay, if your favorite, you know, entrepreneur does ice baths and you hate freezing your balls off, maybe you don't do ice baths. That's cool. Some people love coffee. Some people don't. Some people are obsessed with Huberman and how he says you shouldn't spike your cortisol in the first 90 minutes of waking. Bro, I sometimes roll over and have caffeine immediately upon waking up. Right? Like, these people don't have these, like, there's no, like, one size fits all. You have to figure out your own stuff. Learn both from yourself and from outside sources, but don't learn so much from the outside sources that you don't learn from yourself. You know, you have to. You're your own boss. You know, you have to be able to set that tone. It's funny you say that. That's like the one Huberman thing that I just absolutely do not care to try is waiting an hour and a half in the morning before having coffee. Forget that. Dude, I'm not doing that so I'm not doing that to like maximize anything. I'm doing that because I'm not trying to raw dog reality for the first like half hour of me sitting there on the edge of the bed, just like staring at the ground. You know?
Right. That's funny. Well, man, awesome answer. Creating your own path. It's so important. This has also been a bit of a trend as well. And it's just so important. You cannot just try to be like everyone else or everyone that you follow, but you do really ultimately, you can take some guidance from them, but you do need to create that path yourself, and it's your path, and no one else can do that but you. No one else knows what that is but you, and you're constantly on this journey to figure that out.
Can I add one caveat to that?
Sure.
Also, just a trend that I see a lot today. Stop branding yourself before you become the technician. Like, become a really good trainer before you have a freaking logo. That's okay. Like, honestly, it should, that I think is how it should go, right? Like, get really freaking good at the thing that you do, and the rest of it will figure itself out, right? But that's part of that identity. Have your identity be being really good at that thing, right? If you, if you run a roofing business or whatever, make sure that you and your employees provide that, attention to detail that you want to be known for before it's the logo that's associated with your stuff, right? Like, so many people, especially with social media, I think they see the finished products. They see the Alex Hormozi when he's already made it. And they see his branding and his nasal strip, and they're like, oh shit, I just need that thing, like the nasal strip. No, you don't need that thing. The first thing, the reason he is who he is because he's fantastic at selling. Remove that one thing, and all the other branding, all the other lessons, all those other things melt away. They don't matter. Exactly. Myself with my stuff. Yes, I have this way that I look at different elements of my business and trying to build out passive revenue streams and come up with the right business structure. Cool. But if that stuff all came before I learned how to train people well and focused on that, then that stuff wouldn't matter, and you wouldn't be talking to me in my own office. Like, none of those things should be possible, So I think treating yourself like that technician and be as technical at that thing as you can in that area, be humble, learn from the best, develop those skills, add those tools to your toolbox. Then once you do that, you're like, all right, what's my brand? What's my color scheme for my Instagram? What's whatever, you know what I mean? But I think a lot of people miss that. It's boring, right? Do it consistently, do it incessantly. And get really good at that. And then people they'll ask for your branding. Like, it's kind of cool. We ran out of merch here a few months ago, and I've got like clients ask me like, hey, when do you have more merch? Like,
that's cool.
All right, I think it's time I focus on that a little bit more, because if I got people banging down my door for, for more shirts with my, business name on it, I think I need to provide that. But if that's what I focused on before I knew how to train people, no one would, I'd have a giant stock of shirts and no one to sell them to. Well,
it's such an important point that you just added. It's about being genuine in what you're promoting. You have something real to offer. Like Andy Frisella is somebody who shits on these people online all the time, and he does it all the time on his podcast about how ridiculous these fake entrepreneurs are, and it's telling them telling people how their coaching program will get them to make all this money, and they got a Lamborghini in the background, right?
They rent the car. They take the, you got the shot.
Yeah.
I think we got it here where I got like my cufflinks and I'm adjusting them right outside the rented car. Dude, the image, like, get away from the image and get good at the thing first. And getting good at something's tough, and it takes time, and you've got to like reassess. Like, it's frustrating sometimes, but that's what you got to spend your time on. Like, if you have one of those photos and you haven't gotten good at the thing yet, you've got it all mixed up.
Yeah.
You know what photo I'm talking about. You've seen
Oh, yeah, of course.
There's a million of them,
yes,
right? We can just plug and play the different... I hope you don't have any of those, because...
No, I don't.
Okay.
Hopefully not. Now I better double check, but... No, man, amazing stuff. Who is one person from your network you think I should have on the podcast? Somebody who's working on some sort of entrepreneurial journey project, has a business.
I think I mentioned Heather a few times. You already had Dom on the show. The three of us really put our heads together a lot for creating content. We approach things differently. She's more in the jiu-jitsu realm, but has a very unique way that she goes about things as well. I think she'd be a great candidate for it. Nice.
Well, I'll follow up on that.
Cool.
Well, Alex, dude, thank you so much for having me, man. Awesome facility. Such a cool story you got. I'm fascinated by this stuff. I could keep talking to you for hours about this. Maybe one day I can jump in and roll a little bit and do some training. That'd be fun.
What are you doing tomorrow?
Well, let's talk about it. Good question. I love it. Cool, man. Well, awesome podcast. I can't wait to see how people react to this one, and stoked to get to know you better and see your continued success.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Bye, everybody. Thank you for joining our conversation today on the Nichols&Dimez Show. Please check out and follow my podcast Instagram at nicholsanddimezshow. I'd love to have you subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube. You can also find it on my website. I welcome and encourage any feedback you can share in the reviews so I can continue to improve and develop the show. Thanks again, and see you next time.